Facebook Live Town Hall meeting here to discuss the water emergency that we have in the village of Mayville in Chautauqua County. We're here to talk through some of the situation that's occurring and also answer any questions that we can from the public. Until further notice, the State Health Department, in conjunction with us here at the County Health Department, have recommended that the Village of Mayville water customers do not use their water for drinking, cooking, or preparing food, or for ingestion by their animals, and also not to brush their teeth with it. The water continues to be acceptable for household uses, such as showering, bathing, cleaning and washing dishes. Boiling your water will not remove the chemicals that have been detected in the water. So this is a different situation than what we've experienced a lot of other times in other villages where we've had a boil water order. This is a do not drink order. It is a little different. We've done this out of an abundance of caution after these samples that we received the day before yesterday now did show the presence of a chemical which I honestly cannot pronounce, and some of our state colleagues here can pronounce. The initials are Pfna, and it is in a class of chemicals that have been linked to potentially have some human health effects, and that's why we really want to be overly cautious and protect the health and safety of the residents and visitors to the village of Mayville. To start out, I guess I should have introduced myself for those of you in the public who don't know me. I'm Christine Schuyler. I'm the County Public Health Director and Commissioner of Social Services. We do have some other people on our panel this morning. I'd like to start with County Executive, PJ Wendell. You're muted, PJ.
I think we'd get this figured out. Morning, everybody. County Executive PJ Wendell.
And also other health department staff, I'd ask you to wave or say hello when I say your name. We have Bill Boria, he's our Director of Environmental Health Services. Also Paul Snyder, he is our Public Health Engineer.
I'm waving. He's
waving. And then if we go to other county agency staff, we have our Sheriff, who's muted. There we go.
Good morning.
Jim
Quattrone.
Our Director of Emergency Services.
Morning, John Griffith.
And then locally as well, we are happy to have our local superintendent of the Chautauqua Lake Central School with us.
Good morning, everyone. Josh Liddell.
And then we're really fortunate this morning to have a lot of our colleagues at both the State Health Department as well as the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. So I'll let Dr. Gary Ginsberg kind of start that round of introductions, please.
Thank you, Christine, and it's our pleasure to participate. I'm Gary Ginsberg. I'm the Director for the Center of Environmental Health within the New York State Department of Health. And Chris Wheeler.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Christine Wheeler. I am the Director of the Bureau of Water Supply Protection.
And Gary Holmes.
Good morning, I'm Gary Holmes. My initials pop up as GCH03 on the readout here. I'm the Assistant Commissioner for Public Affairs for the State Department of Health. Good morning.
And from DEC, this is Sean Mahar. I'm the Chief of Staff for the agency. And also with us is George Heitzman. George, if you want to introduce yourself.
Good morning, everybody. George Heitzman. I'm the Assistant Director for Remediation. My crew will be leading the track down for possible sources in the village.
I must apologize because also with us today, we are really happy to have the village's mayor.
Good morning, Ken Shear here.
Okay, I think I went over the warning in general, but I think it may be helpful for the public to hear from Dr. Ginsberg on what this chemical is that was detected in the water.
Sure, and I'll take a shot at pronouncing it for you, Christine. It's Perfluoronenoic Acid. So it is a cousin of other what we call PFAS chemicals, which it's part of a family of chemicals that New York State has recently brought about drinking water standards for, which is PFOA and PFOS. And there's a lot more known about the health effects and the occurrence of PFOA and PFOS. And these are all considered emerging contaminants that are still being studied, both in animal studies and in human populations. So we're learning more about them, but we do want to be very precautious with the exposure, because we know that, you know, they have a long residence time, both in the environment and in humans. And so it's important to stop exposure. You know, when there's an unusual or significant source, it's important to stop exposure once we know about it.
Great, thank you. One thing that we want to make sure that the public is aware of is the water distribution efforts that are going on. And that really is one of our interim measures to help our village residents and business owners get by during this time until we can get the long-term measures in place to mitigate this issue. I'd ask that John Griffith, our Director of Emergency Services, just review the water distribution plan as it currently stands.
Thank you, Christine. The water distribution plan is set up, working with our partners in New York State Office of Homeland Security. We have brought in 10 pallets up to date of canned water, which were distributed somewhat last night by the village, and that water is still going to be there to distribute now. We'll be distributing water from 10:30 to 2:30 today, and again from 4:30 to 6:30 today. And again, tomorrow on Saturday from 10:30 to 12:30 in midday area. That can be picked up at the town of Chautauqua Highway Department. And that's at 50 Patterson Street in Mayville, New York. And it's a drive-through system. We're being very careful with COVID compliance to do this. You don't have to get out of your car, just pull up, we'll set the water into your car. It's really important to us that we maintain COVID security through all this as we go forward. We also have worked through with the school. Members of our staff have worked with Mr. Liddell, and we have a 500-gallon water buffalo coming in to bring water in for the school, and that will be working with Chautauqua School. We hope to have that one in place by 3 o'clock today. We should have that in. So we're working with that, and if Mr. Liddell has any comments on that, when I get done, it'll be fine. But other than that, the water plan is in place. We're moving forward. And I guess I'll turn it over to Mayor Scheer. I believe you have comments on further things with water coming that you've contracted with. We do. We're able to contract with Walmart, and we have 7 pallets of water we are picking up as we speak right now. And they are sending us a tractor trailer of water tomorrow. The state's going to let us store it locally here in our DOT barn so it doesn't freeze, and we'll be handing it out, as you said, at 50 Patterson Street at the town building, 10:30 to 12:30 and 4:30 to 6:30. And that'll get us through at least the next several days. And of course, as we all know, we're working on long-term situations or resolutions for the situation here as fast as we can. One thing I would like to mention quickly, and I think it's important to the local people here that have been asking questions to me all day, this is not a new change to the water. This is a little different than some emergencies. You know, nothing spilled into our water program yesterday, anything like that. This is a new test, something that has not been tested for before. So that's where this is emerging from. It's nothing changed with your water overnight.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to thank all the agencies that have worked together to put this water plan in place. You can see there's a lot of different levels of government working together, from New York State to Chautauqua County to the village. And I think the partnerships that we've put together, we're going to make this as easy to get through as possible. We're working through this. The last piece I can speak about is through the jail. The sheriff has contracted and has made sure that the jail is taken care of for the people that are there. Sheriff, do you have any comments on the water situation there?
Yes. So I wanted to address, there was actually one question that was sent in, I believe last night or this morning. As far as we are ensuring that the inmates and our staff have bottled water or water from a water cooler They are being issued, most inmates will be getting one bottle of water at a time, and when it is gone, they will turn it over to a correction officer to get it replaced. So they are not going without water, but they are only being issued one bottle at a time for safety reasons and other reasons as far as protecting any plumbing issues that may be resulting from bottles getting flushed. So they are not being limited on the amount of water that they're having. Between the bottled water and water cooler water, the corrections officers are ensuring that they get the proper supply.
And Sheriff, could you also speak to food preparation in the jail, just to ensure that the inmates are?
Or, yeah, that's again maybe a couple part answer there, but our kitchen staff, cooks, are using water from water coolers for preparation. Much of our preparation is what we call bag and boil. It's coming already prepared. It just needs to be heated up. But inmates are getting 3 meals a day. They're going to continue to get the 3 meals a day. One of the concerns was is that the inmates need to use water for cooking. Anytime that is the case, it's part of commissary, so it's in addition to the 3 meals that the inmates themselves have purchased and are heating things up in the microwave. So again, they will have ample water supply for that if need be.
Okay, great. Thank you, Sheriff. One thing that I would like to add from a public health perspective as far as the water distribution process, if anyone is on isolation or quarantine because of either being positive for COVID-19 or being identified as a close contact, we would ask that you would call the health department's nursing line, the 753-4491, and talk to your nurses here who are monitoring your cases, and we will ensure that water is delivered to you. As any other needs that you may have during your isolation and quarantine time, we'll be more than happy to make sure that you have what you need during this time. We are getting several comments in now through our Facebook page, and I'm going to go ahead and read them, and I'd ask that the most appropriate person, I guess, who you feel you are with the expertise to answer this chimes in. How will the system be flushed out if the fourth well is used, which has no record of these chemicals? How about
Christine, I'll take it if no one else wants to, but I think we'll be developing plans as that comes online, and we'll obviously put information out to the public so you know exactly the steps we'll take. We've obviously had to do this in some other communities, and we know those questions exist. And right now we're focused on obviously making sure that bottled water continues in the short term as we develop these longer term and interim plans to make sure clean water is provided. So that will all be detailed very soon.
Great, thank you. Don't understand how it is safe to wash dishes or take showers if brushing your teeth is a hazard. Maybe Dr. Ginsburg?
Yeah, the main concern with brushing of the teeth is, of course, inadvertent ingestion of some of the water that you're using to brush your teeth, and especially for young children. So brushing teeth, while it's not meant to be drinking the water, we can't guarantee that. So we just want to make sure that that notification goes out. Washing of hands, washing dishes, these sort of exposure, the contact on the skin is not really a source of exposure, or in the shower, or even the bathtub. These are not pathways to get it into the human body.
Thank you, Dr. Ginsburg. Again, it really goes back to that ingestion of the water. Another question, why does the county not have an emergency notification system? Most of us drank this water for a long time because we were not informed. John Griffith?
We do have an emergency notification system through New York Alert and Reverse 911. It was, when this was brought to our attention and it needed to be notified, we did send that out. This all started yesterday in midday, and the notifications went out as soon as all the pieces were in place. But yes, the notifications did go out in a timely manner as the situation broke free.
Thank you, John. New question. Does this affect homes on wells right next to those on village water? We have a shallow well right next to someone on village water. Who would like that one?
Well, I can start. We have no indication that private wells have been impacted, although DEC, they're on the call. They will be doing an investigation, and I would imagine that would include testing of private wells, but I'll let the DEC representatives field it from there.
Yeah, I think we'll start out with sampling some monitoring wells within the village to see, where this might be coming from, to get a little better sense on whether one part of the village or another we should prioritize for private well sampling. So I think once we get the results from that initial round of investigation back, we'll have a little better idea where we should target private well samples.
Yeah, and Christine, if I could add that the construction and the depth of a private well is going to be a lot different than any of the public supplies. So it's not necessarily, proximity is not necessarily an indicator of what might be in someone's private well, given those differences.
Great, thank you. How long have the wells been contaminated?
I'll start and just say that, that's an uncertainty that once more is known about the potential sources and when they may have been using, or whatever the circumstance was about using this perfluorinated compound, we'll know better at that point. But right now, we don't really have a good feel for that.
But that's part of what our investigation is going to uncover, and that's part of our commitment to the community to make sure that we get all the facts. And obviously, if anyone has any information that's going to be helpful to us, we'll make sure we provide some contact information for DEC folks, and you'll see us around the town. So obviously, any information that you have about things or substances or fires or spills that may have occurred, that's going to be really helpful for us in having a better understanding of how this may have come to be.
Thank you. And right along those lines, what did officials know and when did they know it? What concerns should I have for the water I drank in the past week?
I can start with that.
Go ahead.
We did some sampling of 2 of the 3 Mayville wells in August and December of last year. And we did see some detections at that time. We were at the sampling was sponsored by the State Health Department. But at the time, we were still learning about these compounds, and we had no real idea what if there was a risk or what. Since then, the state has been reviewing samples, and they passed samples. They reviewed the samples from late last year from the village of Mayville, and they identified the fact that we should take a closer look at that, which is what we did a week ago. We collected additional samples, got the results late Wednesday, and here we are. So I'll let someone from the State Health Department maybe comment on that as well.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful for the public to understand the levels that we've seen, as far as what's regulated, what's not, and what those levels are, for the big picture here.
Okay.
So
sure.
Bill, do you want to take these, Gary, or do you want me to take the regulatory questions?
Yeah, no, yeah. Why don't you do the regulatory, and I could and perhaps talk a little bit more about wells 3 and 4 and just how we knew that was all part of the picture.
Sure. So PFNA is very similar to 2 compounds that folks may have heard about in the past, which is PFOA and PFOS. They fall into this category that we call perfluoroalkyl substances, or PFAS. So there's a lot of acronyms here. PFOA, PFOS, PFNA are 3 of thousands of perfluoroalkyl compounds. Currently, there are only 2 of those compounds regulated in the state of New York. Those are PFOA and PFOS, like we had mentioned before. New York is kind of on the leading edge of some of these regulations because these compounds are not regulated at the federal level. They are not part of the Safe Drinking Water Act. And we've only really been regulating these compounds since August of this year. So PFNA at this point in time is not a regulated compound, which makes the situation a little bit more complicated. As Bill had mentioned, we did see it in wells number 1 and 2 late last year. In that period of time, we have adopted MCLs for those 2 other PFAS compounds. We wanted to provide some additional sampling assistance to the village of Mayville, knowing that they were going to need to comply with the PFOA and PFOS MCLs. We accommodated that request and sampled well number 3 as well. As Bill had mentioned earlier, we didn't think, based on kind of the construction, the location of the well, how far away it was from the other 2, that this would be an impacted well. When we did test it, and again, to provide assistance to the village of Mayville to comply with the MCL requirements that we do have in place, we found that the levels in well number 3 were 330 parts per trillion. That causes pause on our end. We regrouped with our management and we decided to complete the steps that we have today. And Gary, I don't know if you have anything to add.
No, that pretty much sums it up. And fortunately, we knew well number 4 was under development, and we thought that would, assist with the drinking water supply and any contamination issues. And fortunately, that has been tested and not affected by these kinds of compounds. And so, the main concern and recent surprise here, very recent surprise, was the high levels in well number 3. And so that, as Chris Wheeler said, has led to this, now advisory to just make sure that, any potential for the public's exposure and the use of these affected wells is stopped, and, turning the page and moving to next steps now.
I would like to comment that the quantities of these contaminants that we're seeing are very, very low. It wasn't too long ago that we just developed the technology to analyze chemicals at this low level. Most chemicals in drinking water are analyzed at a level of parts per million. Lead is analyzed at parts per billion. These contaminants we're looking at are parts per trillion, much, much smaller quantities. So it's really an effort by the scientific community that we're able to analyze these, and the health community that they're able to recognize that there is a potential problem. Because 20 years ago, we would not have been able to, we didn't know these existed. We would not have been able to analyze these chemicals at such a low level.
And that maybe takes us to another question here. What health effects were residents exposed to by drinking village water prior to the official announcement?
Yeah, Christine, if I could just double back to the last question about what about in the last week? Someone asked about the concern they had about drinking water recently. I don't know if that's a visitor or just worried for some reason about very recent consumption. But, these are not what we call acute health effects. So this is something that does take a long time for ongoing day in and day out exposure for there to be any concern at all, and that's at higher levels than what we've seen in the village water supply in terms of where we know that in animal studies, for example, there have been effects. So we don't expect to see health effects, for example, demonstrable in any of the residents who have been drinking the water chronically or in the last week, so to speak. However, anyone with a concern on a particular personal basis should talk to their physician, who and the medical community in general is aware of these emerging contaminants, and they can certainly reach out to us and we can talk through any specific concerns. In terms of the general health effects, what has been found in animal studies is effects on the way the liver works. There's been studies looking at its effects on thyroid hormone, some developmental delays in early life studies, and always people ask whether this thing is a carcinogen or not, and it's an uncertainty because it hasn't been tested. Again, it's an emerging contaminant that's still being evaluated, and so there aren't any cancer data for it. Other chemicals in this class have some evidence, some suspect evidence for cancer, but not clearly being regulated as carcinogens at this time.
Yeah, there are several questions in the chat about, potential health impacts and what people could do to protect their health. And I don't, we've really said this clearly, but really reducing and eliminating exposure to the water is what's eliminating the exposure right now to these chemicals. And Dr. Ginsberg, if you could speak to what the impact that has on the presence of these chemicals in people.
Sure. Yeah, and I'm sorry I left out on my list of effects. Immune effects. I want to make sure that is it's part of it. And again, these are studies in animals with some human epidemiology that's looked at this. And there's ongoing studies again in various designs to look at immune, look at all the other parameters I talked about. But in terms of immunity and what we are concerned about mostly, it's things like cigarette smoking, vaping. These are, some of the things that get people into the most question marks about immune function. In terms of environmental exposures, I'm sorry, the follow-up there, Christine, about health effects. What was your question? Oh, stopping the water supply. Yeah, right. Yeah. So mitigating exposure from this time forward is absolutely the most important aspect. Again, this is very precautionary. We don't think people are going to be, as I said, we don't think people are going to be seeing or noticing health effects from these levels in the water. However, it is important and prudent to stop the consumption, and that will immediately to start knocking down whatever is in the system as these chemicals are excreted through the kidney, in the urine.
Okay. One of the questions was, does PFNA come through water filters, such as the filtered water fountains in county buildings or other places, or Brita filters?
Bill, do you want me to take these or would you prefer?
No, would you take it, please?
Sure, I can do that. So the filtration question, always comes up to us when we run into these situations. And unfortunately, it's not an easy question to answer. So if you have a refrigerator filter or a Brita filter or any other type of filter, those filters are manufactured to remove certain compounds. Most of the filters that we have in our own homes, including the ones that I have in my home, are for what's called taste and odor compounds. And in some cases, those same filters are certified for lead removal. There are many, many different compounds out there, many, many different certifications, and there is a certification body that establishes testing protocol for those types of filters. So if you are going to buy a filter, we recommend that you buy a filter that is certified for NSF P473, which, again, I want to caution folks, this is good for exposure mitigation. It's good for lowering levels, but, bottled water is our preference at this point in time. In order to determine whether or not that filter is certified. And I brought props with me today, and hopefully, you can see it on my camera. This is a box for a filter. You'll have a insignia on the side of the box, and underneath that insignia, that'll say what it's certified for. If you have any questions, you can send those questions into the county health department and we can help assist, or we've provided some phone numbers, but it's not a very straightforward answer to your question, although it's a very, very important one. We're working on some guidance. There's been some changes in the testing protocols in the last couple of years, and we want to make sure that the guidance is up to date and we can hopefully get that out to you. But it is nuanced.
And right along those lines, Chris, if you could also, someone said, I understand reverse osmosis systems can remove this contaminant. Any comments on that?
Again, reverse osmosis systems that are for residential use are a little bit different than reverse osmosis for commercial, for public water supplies. So it's very important that, if you do have a reverse osmosis system, you take a look at the manufacturer's information on it and take a look and see what it has been tested for chemical reduction, organic chemical reduction, or PFOA and PFOS reduction. They're not all equal, although reverse osmosis very much is a good treatment technology in general. Again, it's nuanced.
Yeah, and Christine, if I could just add that, again, as Chris Wheeler just said, we really want people to avail themselves of the bottled water. That's more of a guarantee than a water filter in terms of, it has to be hooked up right, it has to be maintained. And, given that we're hoping that this is a relatively short-term situation with bottled water, that again, we don't know how short-term, but we'd much rather see people avail themselves of that rather than going to filters. If people do want to do that and can't, for one reason or other, reliably get their bottled water, then certainly they can call the New York State Department of Health numbers that are available, and we can talk them through a little bit more about the water personal point of use water filtration.
Yep, and we're more than happy to discuss these issues, like Gary said, with individual consumers if they have questions. Also maintenance of these filters are key. Even when you do find a filter that might work for you, you need to look at the manufacturer's instructions carefully. I know, even personal experience, sometimes we're not changing out those filters as often as we should, but in these types of situations, it's critical to know what the change out criteria is and that you do that in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions. But again, if you have any questions related to that, we're more than happy to help you out and kind of discuss your individual circumstances.
Thank you. We're getting several questions related to the New York State requirements for testing, or was this, when did this new testing requirement go into place? And if we found these compounds showed up last year and actions just now being taken, why a year? And where was the concern? Was there, concern within this, I guess, within this last year? And when were these regulations enacted? I would start by saying in 2016, Governor Cuomo did create this water quality response team, which is led by the state health department and the state DEC, really to do what we're doing right here, really to quickly investigate any potential water contamination issues across New York State. And when something does show up as a red flag, even if it's not a contaminant that's regulated, even if it's not at a level that has been set, we still monitor that very closely. And I've been very impressed with the partnership that we've already seen just with the state health department and the state DEC to quickly move in when concern was noted in this. So I don't know, maybe if it's Christine, if it's you, as far as the regulations. I know this new PFAS regulations regarding the PFOA and the PFOS came into play just in 2020, which is when we did this.
Sure, thanks, Christine. So, again, there's so many acronyms, but the regulations are for PFOA and PFOS. PFNA remains unregulated in New York State. The testing requirements for a village the size of Mayville would begin in February of 2021. At this point in time, the majority of the systems that have tested are larger. So they're in above 3,300 up to, our largest systems that we have in the state. Those systems have tested with their first quarter of sampling currently. So PFNA remains unregulated in the state of New York at this point in time. Other systems, I'm seeing some questions in the chat box about whether other systems have tested. Again, smaller systems are not required to test until February of 2021. Some systems have in advance of that. Those systems are only required to test for both PFOA and PFOS. They are not required to test for PFNA. That said, many water systems will submit a test result to a laboratory, and that laboratory will report out many different PFAS compounds. What we see for the most part is those labs are reporting out 6 PFAS compounds. And of those 6, PFNA is one of them. And again, I feel like I'm repeating myself. The only 2 that are regulated are PFOA and PFOS. So sometimes we'll see other compounds, and fortunately, they've largely been at very, very low levels, but those remaining compounds are not covered by the regulation that we promulgated or passed in August of this year.
Yeah, and if I could just follow up, we have now a fairly large database of PFOA, PFOS, even leading up to our 2020 regulation of these compounds. And other, so we know a fair bit about, going back to 2015, of at that time a sampling of the largest water supplies in New York State, of where these compounds, this family of compounds, is being found. And the leading indicator compounds have been PFOA and PFOS, which is why these have been the targets for regulatory action. And which, by the way, there's not been federal leadership, and many, the vast majority of the states in the country don't have any regulation of these compounds. And so, New York is one of the leading states here in regulating this family of compounds in drinking water. And what we have found, again, is that PFOA, PFOS are typically in 95% or more of the cases, the leading indicator compounds. And if they're not there, we haven't been seeing much else. This one is an unusual situation that PFOA and PFOS are not elevated, but PFNA is. And so, that's something now that we have to deal with as an individual case.
Yeah, we really don't know a lot about PFNA, but so we're being extremely cautious because we don't want to take a chance that this could be a compound that could cause health effects for our residents. So we really are trying to be overly prudent and doing the best we can to mitigate any potential risk that could be out there. Another question was, is bottled water tested for PFNA levels?
Chris, can you talk about our approach to bottled water?
New York State does regulate bottled water. We, again, are one of the few states that do. Generally, throughout the country, the bottled water needs to meet federal FDA requirements in terms of quality and chemical content. We have requested PFAS, so that larger group of data from our bottled water suppliers. Most of those suppliers that we certify have submitted data to us, and we've seen very few instances of pure PFAS compounds in that water. I can't speak for certain whether all bottled water is absent of PFNA. It is not a required test for bottled water in New York State at this point in time. But we do have some data regarding that, but it's not a huge data set, very similar to public water supplies. Bottled water companies do not need to test for PFNA either.
And that is right on the heels of another question. Are other villages and towns within the county being tested for PFNA as well? And I think, we do follow, the lead, whatever the state tells us. By law, we, has to be tested for in our public water supplies. As Christine just said, we have the panel that is tested for, and any red flags are absolutely followed up with DOH and DEC. Is there something you want to add to that before we move on?
I can add something. As Christine Wheeler indicated, the larger systems have already started to test for PFOA and PFOS, and usually the lab, oftentimes the lab reports 6 compounds. Smaller systems under 3,300 are all of our community public water supplies, and schools are required to test for PFOA and PFOS starting. They have to collect their first sample by February, I believe it's 21st. And then there is some pretty rigorous sampling beyond that. They're required to do quarterly sampling. And if they have no detections after 2 quarters of sampling, they do not have to continue their quarterly sampling, but there is still a requirement for them to sample less frequently.
And there's also an annual requirement for an annual water quality report that is made public that every municipality has to complete and post publicly. Correct, Bill? Is there anything else on that?
Yeah, and actually the Village of Mayville's annual water quality report for 2019 came out in early 2020. And they're required, all systems are required to report detections of chemicals in that annual water quality report. And the Pfna results, along with any other detections, were reported in the village's annual water quality report for 2019. And there's a note in their report. I have it here. It says that at this time, the EPA and New York State DOH are currently studying PFAS to determine whether an MCLG, maximum contaminant level, or maximum contaminant level are needed. And as many panelists have said, they found that that was needed, and that was put into law starting in August.
This sampling and this analysis in these water quality reports, they occur for every municipality, every water supply that's out there. So it doesn't matter if it's the city of Jamestown, BPU, if it's the village of Mayville, if it's the city of Dunkirk or any other water supply that's regulated out there. Any idea as to the source of this contamination? There's a few things about, is there a chemical manufacturer here that may have contributed to contaminating the water? Could the big fire in Mayville, that have contributed to the fire? And also, where are the wells located in Mayville?
Well, with regard to sources, one of the first things DEC wants to do is get a more detailed chemical analysis of what's present in the wells. As DOH had said, their analysis is for 6 compounds. When we go out and do environmental investigations, we sample for more than 100. And what that allows us is to look at very trace levels of these contaminants and develop a chemical signature, or a fingerprint, if you will. And that fingerprint will allow us and give us clues as to, is this a firefighting foam? Is this an industrial chemical? Which will help us track down possible sources. Pfna is an ingredient in some firefighting foams. However, some of the other ingredients that we typically see are not present in the samples that DOH has run. So at this point in time, I'm not sure we would say it has a firefighting foam signature. But again, if we go out and do more detailed analysis and come up with this fingerprint, we'll get some clues. One of the other things we're working on is Mayor Shearer has put us in touch with the fire chief and the DPW chief, and we're going to do some interviews with them next week. And based on their knowledge of what goes on in the village, where there may have been fires that were extinguished with foam, we will use those leads to better focus our investigation as to where we drill wells. So the answer to the question is we don't know yet. One of the possibilities is this chemical is an ingredient in some plastics manufacturing, particularly chemical resistant plastics that are used in chemical plants. And we want to pursue that lead. And again, if the people who know what go on in the village, you can help us out with, if someone was fabricating plastics, and I'm not talking about, plumber's pipe dope that everyone has in their house. I'm talking about very specialized chemical resistant plastics. That's one of the other possible leads that we need to investigate.
I'll just take the question about the where are the wells located. For security purposes, we do not release the exact location of water supply sources to the public. Although some people may know where they are, I will just say that they are located west of the village proper, and leave it at that.
I think that leads us into several questions regarding, any idea how long this is going to go on for, how long will people not be able to drink the water, and what is the long-term plan here?
Christine, this is Sean. I'll start that off and others can fill in. Well, obviously, we're all working quickly and collectively to advance solutions to this. And, our commitment to your community is obviously to keep the village residents informed every step of the way. And this is an evolving situation. We don't have specific timeframes or commitments just yet because we've got to explore a lot of different options. As George pointed out, we've got a lot of investigatory work that we have to do, but we are moving quickly, and that's what you should know. And every step of the way, we're going to keep you informed as we make steps. You've heard about the new well number 4 that we're looking to develop in the village, that the village is already looking to develop. We're working to move that quickly, and we're in the process now with other experts in the state and the county and the local government trying to identify all those other options. So we want to get this wrapped up very quickly. That's our goal, and that's our commitment to you, and we'll definitely keep you informed every step of the way.
Thank you. Anyone else have anything to add with that?
I can tell you that, at the village level, we have looked at several options with our engineers. So we are looking at this and something that we're going to try to wrap up as fast as we can, but we don't want to be the person that says, yeah, it's going to be a short-term deal. So we're hoping for the best and planning for the worst. We're planning this lasting longer than normal, but we're hoping that it does not. So we're doing the best we can. Same thing. We want to let everybody keep everybody posted in what's going on. But everything is so new right now. We've looked at a lot of different things in the past 10, 12 hours.
Now, Mr. Mahar, I think along the line, you're talking about the foam, or maybe it was George. If not the foam, could it have come from like the buildings itself when because of firefighting, thousands of gallons dumping on a large fire and then running off? Is that something that's being considered?
Yeah, no, this is such an unusual chemical that we would not see it just with water being used to put out a burning building. Really, it's an ingredient in flammable liquid firefighting foams that you would use on an automobile fire or a flammable liquid fire. But again, we're not seeing some of the other chemicals that typically go along with that. So it's certainly a lead we need to pursue, but I wouldn't call it firefighting foam yet. And certainly not from your normal burning building.
Is there a blood test that could show if you had high levels? Well, Gary, Dr. Ginsberg, you're muted.
Is that better?
That's better.
Yeah, sorry about that. I had some barking dogs in the background. We call it biomonitoring to look at what is in blood for these kinds of compounds because they are detectable in blood, and there's a literature of these kinds of studies from other parts of the country, as well as some work that New York State DOH has done biomonitoring. So that is something that could be found if there was exposure. It is traceable that way. And if there are concerns along those lines, that's another follow-up conversation we could have. Wouldn't be a big rush to do that necessarily because, the blood levels are relatively stable over time. So that's something that, we can discuss in coming weeks.
And along the lines of your barking dogs there, Dr. Ginsburg, what could the impact be on pets who have been ingesting this water?
Right. Yeah. That is not something that's been researched. It's it's more in the realm of veterinary sciences. However, animals do drink a lot of water, do have good excretory pathways. What we do know about PFAS chemicals is that they are cleared much faster, say, by some of the test animals we study. So it's pretty variable across different, I'll call it phyla or species, in terms of the residence time and the effects. So that's something that you'd need to do a dog toxicology or a cat toxicology study to do. Those studies haven't been done. But we would, again, it's prudent and precautious to avoid pet exposure at this point.
Okay. Should residents outside of the village have their personal wells tested?
Start with that. And as we said earlier, DEC is going to be doing a source evaluation to find out if they can determine what the source of this chemical is. And when they get further along with that, I imagine they could identify an area where people may want to have their water tested. George, do you want to comment further on that?
Yeah, I mean, just to follow up, we know that, the new well that they're hoping to bring online is clean. So we know that the water in that part of the village is not affected by this. We know that the 2 wells or the 3 wells in a certain part of the village have been affected. We have a site, the former Standard Portable site, which is down by the lake. We have data from 6 wells there that were not detected. So we know that down in that part of the village, the water is clean. So as we put in more wells and identify the segments of the village that may be affected, we'll be able to make better recommendations as to which private wells, if any, need to be sampled. But right now, it's too early to tell.
Thank you. I'd like to circle back to water distribution and availability. And I think John can review that plan again of how often people can pick up water, and reminder the COVID precautions are being taken. And again, please do not go out to get water. If you are in isolation or quarantine, call us and we'll have water delivered to you. But along those lines too is the question is there any assistance for businesses out there that need water to operate and cook? So, John?
As far as assistance for businesses, we're doing everything we can. We're trying to get some larger containers of water coming in from the state to see if we can arrange for gallon containers to move that. And I've been looking at some emails this morning back and forth, whether we could do that. The water distribution plan for residents, there is no limit as to how often you can pick up water. We just hope everybody will pick up what they need. The times of distribution are today from 10:30 to 12:30 and from 4:30 to 6:30. And that's at 50 Patterson Street, the town of Chautauqua Highway Building. And you can pick it up there. Also, if you're shut in and you cannot get to pick up the water or to pick up yourself, you can call Mr. Buxton, and his phone number is 269-4801. And we'll make arrangements to get the water to you. As Christine said, please, if you're in any sort of a COVID protocol, let us know. We'll get the water to you through health or through the village of Mayville. COVID security is extremely important through all this. We want to make sure that we maintain that going forward. Any questions on any of this, please give a call and we'll work forward to make sure that we get everybody the water they need.
I'd like to add that we have 2 large senior apartment complexes here in the village, and we are delivering water to them today. So if you're watching or hearing this message, we will be bringing water to you today. And any businesses in the village that need help, Mr. Griffith Emergency Services or myself or the village will do everything we can to get you some help. Just let us know what you need.
Our time is getting close here to to 10 o'clock, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time. I apologize if there were some questions that I missed. I was trying to get them all as they were coming in. And if we did miss any, we will make sure that we get an answer posted for that. In conjunction with the State Health Department, we are developing frequently asked questions documents, which will be available for the public. And we'll add to those as more questions frequently get asked. There are some phone numbers that were published in our press release, and we'll make sure that we get them back out there for you again. They are for specifically for the State Department of Health. We also have email inquiries that can be sent to us. And also we'll have all of this information and more at our county website, chq.com. Again, I'd like to thank everyone for being part of this today. I would really like to once again try to reinforce that we are really taking proactive, aggressive actions to try to treat this compound that's not regulated like other compounds that are regulated. Even though there aren't any enforceable standards, we don't have any standards for this. We really are trying to really err on the side of caution and proactively protect the health and safety of our residents in being overly cautious on this. Those who know me know that I try very hard to not incite panic, but I try to be as real and upfront and honest as I can with the situation that's happening. That is what we're trying to do. And we will continue to do that. I ask that continue to ask your questions. We'll answer them to the best of our ability. And thankfully, we've got state health and the state DEC partners to help us with that. School questions, I'm sure Josh Liddell will be more than happy to try to answer them for any parents or anyone in the school community who has them. And I'd like to turn it over to County Executive Wendell for any closing comments.
Sure. Thank you, Christine. I'd like to thank everybody for being part of this. You know, one of the things that may not be realized by many watching is as soon as this happened, the players, everyone on this were involved and the ball was rolling and the parts were moving. There are several moving parts when you think about New York State Department of Health, New York State DEC, Chautauqua County Department of Emergency Services, our health department, the village in the town of Chautauqua, village of Mayville. So from the very beginning, as soon as this information was released, we were working on the plan you see here. We did have the release yesterday within about 12 hours of notification of these levels. So to get this many groups working together, I thank Gary Holmes from the state, also from Dr. Ginsburg, Christine, George, Sean, everybody who's been working from the state with us has been phenomenal. There's a lot of moving parts with this, and individuals realize that we wanted to make sure that this was, again, put in a situation where we weren't asking the same questions and we were able to answer questions that you do have. So, you know, please, with any further questions, reach out. We will get those answered as best we can. We have the best people in New York State working on this, without a doubt. You know, this is a great team. Our teams in the county have been very successful. We will get through this. You know, I've used the phrase CHQ strong, and one more time, this will be evident of our teams and what we can do together in a unity of effort to provide for our residents. So I thank everybody on this call. I thank everybody from Facebook Live that has asked the questions. And again, your safety is paramount to my administration and everyone on this video. So please, you know, keep that in mind, that we are doing everything we can for our residents here in Chautauqua County. We ask everybody to be safe, and thank you for your time.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. And until we speak again, take care. Wear your mask, wash your hands, keep your distance.